Hi and welcome to the Pattern Clips tutorial. We're going to take a quick look at the new Pattern Clips feature in version 7 of FL Studio. To start off with, Pattern Clips are really no different than actual patterns laid out in the playlist, but there are a few cool things that we can do with Pattern Clips that we couldn't do before. First, when we put a pattern clip on the playlist at the bottom, you can see and edit exactly the notes that we want. We can also move the pattern to wherever we want in the timeline. You could do that before with the little pattern bars, but you couldn't see exactly what notes were playing, so it was more just guesswork, and it oftentimes led to the project getting muddled or off time. So now we can place a pattern in the playlist wherever we want, and then we can edit it and chop up patterns as well, which is great because this means you no longer have to create whole new patterns for small edits. For example, if you had a synth line going and you wanted to change at the end of the bar just once, that meant that you had to go back in and create a whole new pattern with the entire bar played out again with the change at the end, and then just stick it in the appropriate place at the timeline. Well, now you can just create a pattern with just the little edit, the end change, and then insert it where it's needed, and just scale back the part that's not needed. This way you can avoid having to create multiple instances of almost identical patterns just for small changes. So we'll look at a few examples. The first one is what I was just talking about. I went ahead and loaded a synth here, and I'll go ahead and let you hear this. Now let's say that every 4 bars I wanted this last note to hit a D sharp instead of an A sharp. The old way, I would have to create a separate pattern with all of this laid out again, and then I'd have to change the last note to a D sharp, and then I'd have to insert it back in the playlist when we wanted it to play. But using pattern clips, all we have to do is simply create a new pattern with that one note on it, and then lay both patterns out in the timeline and simply replace that one note. So I'll show you what I'm talking about here. Make sure that's selected. So we'll just put this is just the one note that we want. And then we'll go down here, maximize this a little bit. Select our sources, pattern number 1. And then we're going to put pattern number 2 right there. Actually, let me erase that and put it down here. Erase this up so you can see. Okay, so we've got pattern number 2 with this one note right here. So all we'd have to do up here at the top, drag this over, and then we'll just scale back pattern number 1 on that last note. And then we'll just go ahead and play this. And then another benefit, of course, is now that you have that one note on a pattern, you can actually experiment with different ideas, like maybe halving the note every now and then. So you could take this and draw it back in like this. So essentially, the pattern clips now kind of become composing tools as well, whereas before you couldn't exactly see what you were dealing with. So this just helps out a lot in putting things together. Now the limitation to this, though, is that if you're using only pattern clips like we are right here, the timeline is going to go right back to the beginning at the end of the pattern clip. So that means that even if you don't have a full 4 bars, like you used to be forced to have 4 full bars, the timeline will think it's the end of the song and will go back to your starting point or wherever you have your loop icon set. So just remember to keep an eye on the length of your pattern clips. You might have to insert some silence in there to avoid this issue. And one more piece of advice when working with pattern clips is that you can use them to chop up beats. For instance, you can do that same thing that we just did, where you could take a drum pattern and maybe just make one pattern of fills and then just chop them up and insert them when needed. Or you could simply mix together different beats or offset patterns to create a simple delay effect. So what I'll do is just go through and play around here a little bit to give you an idea of what I'm talking about. And we'll just load a pattern. So we've got pattern 2 just playing. And then we can go to pattern 3. We'll do something like this. And we can go over here. Okay, so we've got like 2 different fills laid out, really simple stuff. But now we can go back in, erase all of this. We'll select pattern number 2. Then we've got pattern number 3 down here. This has our fills. And again, what we can do is just draw this back to what we need. We'll go back here, and then we'll put pattern, or the second part of pattern 3 this time. Gotta keep deselecting that. What I'm going to need to do in this case, since we can't draw backwards, I'm going to have to go up here and choose the slice tool. We'll just left click, hold, and drag. And now we've sliced that, and so we'll just delete this first part. We'll move this over. So you can see how easy that is and how it gives us much more specific control over our parts. Take some time to play around with different options, like I said, maybe layering 2 drum patterns and offsetting them by a beat or something like that to create a weird kind of delay effect back and forth. But remember to be creative and you'll be used to pattern clips in no time. But I want to thank you again for watching, and I'll see you next time.